Ay, wait. Buzz sound sa akong background. Okay, wait lang ha. I'll try to check this one out. How about this one? Nagyapon. Hello, hello. Hello. Nagyapon. Okay na, okay. It's good na. Thank you, thank you. How about the others? Let me know if na ay background or any background noise. If akong baby ang musyagit, medyo di na ako na siya makontrol. So, sorry for that. Okay. Okay, so start na. Okay, so before, last meeting, I've shared this initial slides about Renaissance architecture. So the picture below, or the picture shown here, shows the St. Peter's Basilica. So in terms of famous structures during this era of architecture, the Renaissance architecture, for me, the famous or the well-known structure is this one, the St. Peter's Basilica, which was constructed and designed during the Renaissance architecture. So, unsa day meaning anang Renaissance architecture or Renaissance? So, from the term itself, Renaissance means rebirth. So, rebirth meaning iyahang gipabuhi og balik. So, unsa may ilang gipabuhi og balik? Unsa may ilang gi-rebirth? It's actually the rebirth of classical architecture. So what are those classical architecture? Those are the Roman and Greek architecture before. So katong yung mga na-discuss during the History of Architecture 1 about Roman and Greek architecture. What they did during the Renaissance architecture is they used those styles, ilahang gi-refined, ilahang gi-adjust based on their requirements, and then ila pang gipanindot. And they also get ideas from Byzantine architecture. They also get ideas from Romanesque architecture, but never sila nikuha sa Gothic architecture. During Renaissance architecture, mostly, or I think 90+% of Renaissance architects really hate Gothic architecture. Murabag, ang previous style, you have this current style right now. Ang previous style, which is the Gothic architecture, you really hate it in a way nga they coined or they name it Gothic, which is from a barbaric tribe in Germany. Okay, so na-discuss na ito na before, no? Pinsa to siya katawahan na. So this one, na-discuss na sa natin eh. And Renaissance architecture originated in Florence, Italy. So from the picture right here, kung sa inyo nakita agara, that's the Florence Cathedral, or what you called the Duomo, D-U-O-M-O, the Duomo in Florence. Meaning ng Duomo is it's a true cathedral. I don't know why is it called true, but I think for me, no, in my personal point of view, it means the main cathedral of the area. Na may mga cathedral nga gagmay in Florence, and the main cathedral is this, the Florence Cathedral. Later on, we'll know sa iyang another term. So in terms of influences, warfare was changed by the invention of gunpowder. So this time around, there are new building types in Renaissance architecture. So aside from the usual nga churches, we have the monasteries, we have the castles. This time around in Renaissance architecture, we have a new building type. Increased understanding of science and arts, medicine and astronomy, and human anatomy. So this time around, some of the greatest inventors, scientists, mathematicians diri sila na nag-start or diri sila nisikat during the Renaissance architecture. So usa sa mga si Galileo, no? I think familiar mo ni Galileo sa astronomy. So during the Renaissance period na sila. Si Leonardo da Vinci, I think you're very familiar, no? Si Leonardo da Vinci. So actually gitawag si Leonardo og father of the medicine. I think more siya yung nag-start kay I don't know, wag ko siya lingaw sa una. Ang iyang pastime, although maayo siya mo painting, di ba, sa Mona Lisa. Ang iyang pastime is maato siya og mga cadaver. Maato siya kanang mga morgue, and then kuha niya ang kanang mga dead na nasa morgue, and then iyang pastime is kuha niya ang heart niya, iyang i-slice niya. Drawing niya cross section, section through A, section through B, floor plan sa heart, any human parts drawing on ni Leonardo. So those time around, ang iyang mga drawings nagamit during the kanipag mga nag-eskwela og medicine. And I don't know, up to now, siguro sa ilang history, ilagya kong gagamit, but due to the modern na mga technologies, lahi na siguro nga references. But before mo na sila, no? That's during the Renaissance period. So artists also attempted to understand the ancient world, its values, literary artistic forms, and architectural forms. So here in Renaissance architecture, there are three phases. I think na-discuss na ko ni before, or na-mention na ko, there are three early. We have High Renaissance, we have Mannerism, and actually, partly, si Baroque or Baroque architecture is from the or after the Mannerism or the late Renaissance. So, bale, after late Renaissance, ni-follow da yun si Baroque architecture. So later on, we'll know a little bit about Baroque architecture. So let's start with this one, no? The early Renaissance, or what we call the Quattrocento. So why is it called Quattrocento? From the term itself, quattro means 4. Cento is 100. That means 1400. Mura bitag 400, which is 400. So it means 1400. So aside from the term early Renaissance, it is also called a Quattrocento. So if architect ka and then you belong into this early Renaissance na time, you can also be called a Quattrocento architect. So in the Quattrocento, concepts of architectural order were explored and rules were formulated. The study of classical antiquity led in particular to the adoption of classical detail ornamentation. So what are those classical detail or classical ornaments? I think you're very familiar with this, no? Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and we have the composite. So I think very familiar, no, during the Greek architecture. So you have this Tuscan, Greek and Roman. No? We have this Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and composite order. So in Renaissance architecture, they revived these styles. Ilang gi-revive. So that means ilang gi-rebirth. So mo nang gitawag siya Renaissance because it's a rebirth of the classical styles. And also in Quattrocento, space was organized by proportional logic. Its form and rhythm subject to geometry rather than being created by intuition as medieval buildings. So unsa maning mga medieval buildings? Medieval era or medieval architecture are those architecture belongs in Byzantine, Romanesque, and Gothic architecture. So again, during Renaissance, they really hate those previous styles, especially Gothic architecture, because what they did during the Gothic architecture is they designed their buildings sobra kataas, and for the Renaissance architects, they don't like it, and for them, it's not proportional. So this time around, they recreated the classical design and they applied a proportional or proportion on its building, especially on the facade. So here, same gyapon, same in terms of planning. They use cruciform type of plan, but mostly they use Latin cross. So I think if you remember this one, Greek cross is this one, equal ang iyahang sides. Latin cross is one of these side is longer compared to the other. So in this example here, it's a Latin cross. So one of the famous architect during the Quattrocento is kani siya, no? Filippo Brunelleschi. Before sa among exam, I think nigawas ni siya si Filippo Brunelleschi. But ang choices na to si Filipino Brunelleschi. And then walay choices nga Filippo. And then ay choices nga none of them. So I think nasayop ko ato kaya medyo tangaon sa siguro during at time. Pagkakita na ko sa term nga Brunelleschi, mo ano guro ni kay I think sounds like or familiar na ko ang name. And without knowing, Filipino ditong gibutang diri sa during sa mong exam, sa board exam. So supposedly dapat ang answer is none of them. So kinsa man ni si Filippo Brunelleschi. So he is a Quattrocento architect. That means nibelong siya during the early Renaissance period. Best known for designing the dome of the Duomo in Florence. So ang dome iyang gi-design. In 1420, he began to design the dome of the Florence Cathedral, the largest since the Hagia Sophia. So, usa pa na break ang record ni Hagia Sophia during this time around this 1420. So, pila man na years around more than almost 1,000 years usa na break ang record ni Hagia Sophia. So, the dome was built without employing centering to support the masonry. So again, the dome was built without employing centering to support the masonry. So centering is usually gigamit during the Romanesque architecture. So unsa gamit sa centering? It's used to support the arc, especially if during construction, and then later on, kuha na siya i-remove once the masonry or once the mortar has been settled. So if medyo strong na ang mortar, strong na ang imong gipangbutang adto nga binder of your kanang gipanggamit nimo nga bato when you construct a certain arc, pwede na nimo tangtangon ang centering. But this time around, si Filippo Brunelleschi during the construction of the building, the Florence Cathedral na dome, wala siya ni gamit o centering. Okay, so mo na iyahang muna yung nakuha nga picture, no? Wala gid siya actual picture, but mo na si Filippo Brunelleschi. I think also during that time ng kaning ilahang fabric right here silang ulo. So unsay porma sa dome of the Florence Cathedral? So kana siya. I think you're very familiar, no? Na ato na ni siyang napakita in one of our examples. So this is the dome of the Florence Cathedral. And if you would like to check on the scale of this dome, this small part right here, kanang may itom nga, that's the scale of a one person or mo na gitaon sa tao. So imagine how big this is nga ang tao nga ni-visit sa lantern of the Florence Cathedral dome is just this size right here. So meaning dako di kay ni ilahang dome of the Florence Cathedral. So this is the interior view of the dome cathedral. So you have this paintings right here at the dome or beneath the dome. And this paintings is actually gitawag siya trampoliel. Literal makita na to siya nga term. It's not the same with before nga fresco ay lahang create because frescoes it's the way they create is ang imuhang plaster is dapat wet then usa ka mo apply sa imuhang paint or sa imuhang medium nga gimong gigamit. So in frescoes you cannot fully detail the inig drawing nimo or inig painting nimo, you cannot fully detail the face, the body, in terms of its effect. It's not that realistic. But sa layo, makita siya, okay siya. But in duol nga point of view, it's not that realistic. It's because it's made of frescoes. But this time around, all of these are realistic paintings, and it is done using trompe l'oeil or trompe l'oeil later on. Makita na to siya nga term. So here is an example of a sketch, and hopefully na mo nakitaan ng mga sketches for Gothic and this Renaissance architecture. So you could present it like this, na sketch, and provide this kani siyang mga labels sa inyong mga parts. So I found this more siya og Facebook page nga na siya mga sketches. I'll share that Facebook page basta na mo makita nga other references. Aside from history, na siya mga sketches on design, on tropical design, which is quite helpful for you guys. So the plan of the Florence Cathedral looks like this. So what type of cross this one? This is a Latin cross. And here is the big dome, which is right above the crossing. So the crossing of the transept and the nave, right above that, na diha ang dome. So the dome is not fully circular in plan. It is actually polygonal in shape. So I think it's a octagonal or more than 8 ang iyang sides. So if you notice before, during Renaissance architecture, the Renaissance architects imposed proportion. So here, when they designed the structure, they actually designed it in a way, they actually computed the proportion of the building. Even though the dome is quite big, gamay ra kay tong tawo nga naangari sa may lantern area or lantern part, but in a holistic view, this church is actually proportional. The dome is not that so big nga gamay na kayo ang iyahang church. Actually, the church itself is quite big also, and the dome is just a part of it, and being proportioned to the whole structure. So another architect, another Quattrocento architect is si Michelozzo di Bartolomeo. So medyo uso gud day sa ilang time, no, kaning type of fabric nga nasa ilang head. So famous work was Palazzo Medici Riccardi. A decade later, he built the Villa Medici at Fiesole, one of the first architects to work in the Renaissance style outside Italy. So this time around, during Renaissance architecture, they have this buildings, new buildings, which is gitawag siya mga palazzo, or what you mean palace, no? Before, during Gothic, during Romanesque architecture, they don't have this kind of building type, but now, na siya yung mga palace. So here, si Di Bartolomeo, actually student ni siya ni Filippo Brunelleschi. So nag-study siya under Filippo Brunelleschi, and ngato siya naka-learn sa iyang own style set during the time nga nag-apprentice siya ni Brunelleschi. So here, actually swerte ni siya nga architect because he worked directly under this man right here, this group of people right here, the Medici Riccardi, or the Medici family. The Medici family is actually one of the famous or kanang kwartahan na family in Italy during Renaissance. So one of the projects of Bartolomeo is this one, the Palazzo Medici Riccardi. So it's a palace in Italy for the Medici family. So if you would ask, sir, unsa may naka-famous or unsa may pasikat ana niya nga structure or nakapanindot ana niya nga structure? Because for us right now, if we would look this structure, if we would examine this structure just by the looks of it, for us it's quite simple. Medyo naiuban mo bati asad ana sa mag box sa kaayo and so on and so forth. But before, during the Renaissance architecture, this building is actually one of the famous building in Italy and one of the prototype. So prototype na siya, meaning anong prototype is it's the first of its kind. So meaning that architect si Di Bartolomeo, siya nakahimo ana nga style, siya nakahimo ana nga type of building, type of design, and then later on gikopya na siya. So if you're the first person or the first building na naka-create ana niya, that means your building is the prototype and other architects would copy from it or refer from it. Okay? So in interior, ingani siya forma, no? Nasa courtyard. So iningsud nimo ato nga palace, there's a courtyard right here. So this courtyard open above, so that means courtyard or what we call atrium. And ingani iyahang interior. So gallery with decorations. So most of these details actually is made of gold. Kaning iyahang mga details right here, purely gold ni siya, naka-gold ni siya. So here, Palazzo Medici was different for its time. So and was the start of several architectural breakthrough. So it is also the first building in the city to be built after the modern order, including its own separate rooms and apartments. So the prototype Tuscan Renaissance Palazzo. So meaning kato siya nga building is prototype Tuscan Renaissance Palazzo or Palace, which is gigamit siya sa lain nga architects. And also at the same time, after few years, siguro after a century, same gigamit yapon to siya nga style. So, unsa may nakapanindot or unsa may gigamit niya, what are the characteristics of that building? So they use a threefold grading of masonry. They use rusticated blocks on the ground floor. And we have this ashlar face at the top story and the cornice. So if we go back, balik tagamay. So this one right here, mo na iyahang rusticated nga area. This one is mo na iyahang naka-ashlar. This one is mo na iyahang naka-cornice. This one right here. So it's a 3 layers or threefold of, so that means 3-story siya. So it's a threefold of masonry. So going back, threefold grading of masonry, rusticated blocks, katong nasa yung ground floor, and ashlar face at the top. So rusticated blocks soon became seen as a status symbol as the materials were costly and rare. So since palace man siya, and then this building is for the famous family in Italy, the Medici family. So before, if nakay building niya, and then you will use rusticated blocks, gamit yung yan ang style, that means it's a status symbol, meaning you're rich or well-off family ka. So what are the rusticated, or what do you mean by rustication? So yung nga siya, no? In a zoom view or a closer look on it, it's composed of several stones, and then those stones have different textures, and then dili siya the same og cut, and then when you place it next to each other, it would create a very texture na wall na mahug siya nga dili flat wall. And if we go back again, balik tagamay, they only applied it on the ground floor. Wala nag-apply sa second floor and third floor. And if you noticed here, the ground floor is fully rusticated, like the bricks or the stones that they used is large and different sizes, and then mas dako siya og kanang embossed, mas grabe ang texture. And then right here on the second floor, they use a stones gyapon, but they don't have those kind of rustication already. Murag semi-flat na lang siya. So this is what you call ashlar. And this time right here, it's quite flat already. So if you notice, there are three, or what we call the three folds masonry, and each masonry here, murag na reflect siya og one floor. So one floor for this rustication or rusticated area, another floor for this ashlar, and another floor for this same material ashlar, but the finish is quite smooth. So para makita gid nila nga three floors ni siya nga palas. So that's the style before, and again, it's the prototype, it's one of its kind, and it's the first of its kind, and other buildings later on follows this kind of design. So here, mo na siya ang ground floor, rusticated area. But if you notice, one floor na siya, but if you notice the floor to floor height, it's not that small, no? Dako kay ni siya nga building. Here, mga tao, if you try to look at the scale, if normal building ni siya during our time today, siguro ang iyahang second floor nga rin magsugod na ng second floor. But during this Renaissance architecture, medyo taas ang ilang floor to floor height. And here, another example that I can show you guys is this one right here. If you notice, though, there's another color right on top, but what they did on the lower part is just a same or kinda not copy, but influenced by this design of Palazzo Medici. But this one was constructed or designed during the 19th or 1901. But if you noticed here, the Palazzo Medici, it's 14th during the 14th or 15th century na gani. So inga na ang effect sa kana nga building. Although for us, if we would try to check the design just by looking at it, medyo simple ra siya. But if you dig deeper on its effect during their time, there are a lot of influences nga iyang nahimo on the later time. So another architect, another Quattrocento architect is kani siya si Leon Battista Alberti. So daghan siyang gi-design, no? And unlike Brunelleschi, he did not see himself as a builder on a practical sense, and so left the supervision of the work. So iya lang is hikuman yung design, di siya ganahan mo moadtog site. Siguro abugan ko siya, no? It's not medyo choosy guro ni siya nga pagkatao, di siya ganahan mo site supervision. So what he did is design lang and then hatag niya and then bahala if i-construct or not. So most of the works here by Alberti is this one, the San Andres Mantua. It's a church. And another Palazzo Rossellai. And here, Santa Maria Novella. So the lights and shade play dramatically over the surface of the building. So this time around, si Alberti is actually ni-follow siya or ni-gamit siya sa design ni Di Bartolomeo. So if you noticed here, more or less, it's the same design. It's the same 3 floors palazzo, but they added these openings and very, very ang grabe ang rhythm, no? Ang repetition sa design. During Renaissance, they really used that kind of design. In terms of repetition, here, if you notice the repetition, the symmetry of the building, they really used that during the Renaissance architecture. So this is the Palazzo Rossellai. So mo na iyahang medyo lisod siya pangitaon og pictures because those buildings in Italy are quite kanang medyo dugol bitaw. So wala kay picture nga medyo layo. So what I have here from the internet is this one right there. Mo na iyang facade. And sa drawing, this is actually the drawing of Alberti. No? So, mo na yung drawing, but actually, during the construction, wala na siya ni visit sa iyang building. So, another works of Alberti, we have the Saint Andrea Mantua. Saint, if you notice na yung mga term na saint or sant, it's just the same. Now, saint or Sant Andreas is the same. No, dili na siya yung na wrong spelling na limtan ang letter I. It's just the same. The Saint and the Sant are just the same. So another example here is the Santa Maria Novella in Florence. So here, although they use those other features such as the rose window, and then we have the facade is quite flat, medyo flat ang facade, but what they did is they provide this type of design wherein naa siya yung mga patterns. So to counter the flatness of its facade, what they did, they added the circles right here, but actually walay gamit. They added this portion right here and more on the their ornaments or the way they added this kani siya nga mga kani mga squares and then the arcs. But actually, if tanaw na siya sa closer look, it's just kind of flat. They just added this kani siya nga mga lines right here. So next, since naman nata sa early Renaissance, we'll now go to the High Renaissance. So for the High Renaissance, concepts derived from the classical antiquity and were developed and used with greater surety. So the most representative architect is Donato Bramante, who expanded the applicability of classical architecture to contemporary buildings. So sa early Renaissance, ang sikat si Filippo Brunelleschi, and we have Di Bartolomeo and Alberti. So muna sila ang tulo. In High Renaissance, Donato Bramante is one of the sikat nga architect during the High Renaissance. And later on, we'll have an example of High Renaissance. Another style, or the third one, is the Mannerism. So during the Mannerism or Mannerist period, architects experimented with using architectural forms to emphasize solid and spatial relationships. The Renaissance ideal of the harmony gave way to free and more imaginative rhythms. So best known architect associated with Mannerist style is, or si, Michelangelo. So aside from being a painter, si Michelangelo is also an architect. So again, no, we have the early Renaissance, or what we call the Quattrocento. We have the High Renaissance, which is the mid. So gitawag siya High Renaissance because most of the famous structures, or one of the most beautiful structures, were constructed during the High Renaissance, which is the Basilica, no? The St. Peter's Basilica. So later on, nata example sa High Renaissance. And the third one, gitawag na siya Late Renaissance, or what we call Mannerism, is the part wherein pa-down na, no? Paubos na ang era of the Renaissance architecture. So marag gitawag na siya Late Renaissance, and aside from doing the revival of the classical forms, they've added, no, na sila yung mga gipang add-on ng mga details. They've added an additional or another architectural forms to it, and medyo it's not that proportional na, or it's not that clean look ang mga mannerism ng mga buildings. Medyo na siya additional na style nga lang gi-add on. So here, from Deki Ching book, Mannerism means a transitional style in European architecture in the late 16th century, particularly in Italy. So it is characterized by the unconventional use of classical elements. So again, no, unconventional na siya. Before, the High Renaissance and the Early Renaissance, it's a conventional use of classical elements. So what they did is ilang gi-copy from the Greek and Roman architecture, ilang improve, ilang gidungagan in terms of proportion. But here, during the Mannerism, they use it in an unconventional way. So was chiefly characterized by a distortion of perspective, elongated forms, and intense, and sometimes gamit sila og mga color or the strident color or mga add-on colors. Because before, ang color sa imong building is just the color, kung sa color sa imong material, it's just the same color for the building. Wala kay gi-add-on nga mga painting. So actually this balik tagamay. This work by Alberti, this one, is actually belongs to kani siya, kaning church, the Santa Maria Novella. It actually belongs to the mannerism. Why? Because they added those additional forms. They applied the classical architecture in an unconventional way. So that work of Alberti is actually belongs to mannerism. So again, ang pinakasikat during this time is si Michelangelo. So we're very familiar sa name ng Michelangelo, but actually taas kay siya pangan. It's Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni. Mo na iyahang complete name, si Michelangelo. Before daw si Michelangelo, ni study ni siya og sa ito yung study grammar, no? Ang gusto nga kurso sa iyang parents, iyang mama is grammar. So ni eskwela siya grammar, and then di siya ganahan, I think bored siya sa grammar. And then he medyo di siya musod sa klase, and then musod siya og mga painting mga class. So instead of grammar nga class, ato siya musod sa painting nga mga class. And ngato siya na-excel actually. And later on, mga around late 50s, 60s, ngato siya nag-start sa iyang mga architectural works. So Michelangelo's dome in St. Peter was a masterpiece of design using two masonry shells, one within the other hand, and crowned by a massive lantern which is same as Florence. So one of the architects sa St. Peter's Basilica is actually si Michelangelo. So that time nag-design niya ang dome of the St. Peter's Basilica. That's an example of high Renaissance. It's not the example of mannerism. So unsa may mga mannerist nga or mannerism na buildings na gi-design ni Michelangelo. So here, as an example is the Laurentian Library. So this one is an example of Michelangelo's design under the mannerism Renaissance period. So ako lang gi-include because Michelangelo is very famous of this work. The painting of the ceiling nga sa may Sistine Chapel in the St. Peter's Basilica. So dili na siya amo ang church gud, no? Tapad sa church na chapel ngadto si Michelangelo gi-commission to paint the whole ceiling of the chapel. And then ang iyang gi-design is ang dome, dili ang whole basilica, no? Ang gi-design ni Michelangelo is just the dome of the St. Peter's Basilica. Later on, we will know kinsay architects sa St. Peter's Basilica. So, kana ra iyang gi-design. Kani lang ang dome. So kayo mga search sayo na pag-design sa dome. Actually, before when you design the dome or when you create a certain design of that part of the structure, what you will create is not just the form, but you will do all the construction details. You will do all the mo-appeal juga during the construction. You will look on it or supervise ka during the construction. So tiguang na si Michelangelo, I think nasa around 60s. Nag-supervise siya diri sa kasaka sa dome sa St. Peter's Church. So here are the examples of mannerism which was designed by Michelangelo. So this one, Porta Pia. So if you notice, not a fully application of classical styles, but here you have the normal way of placing your columns, and then you have this pediment right here, if you remember the pediment, and you have this block right here, which actually, although it's quite proportioned, but if you clearly try to check if part ba siya sa classical architecture, the same design ba siya sa classical architecture, this one actually doesn't belong in classical architecture. So these are the added forms, murag mga add-on. And this one, the Laurentian library, dili ning mga gagmay nga structures na rin. The Laurentian library is this one right here. Medyo L-type siya. And then there's a dome right here. So I don't have a picture of the parts right here, the kind of closer look, but the way they place their windows, although repetitive siya, murag suon-suon ng or sunod-sunod ang mga windows, but the way they design it is not fully symmetrical. Medyo asymmetrical ang iyang design. That is why it is included in the mannerism type. Another architect is si Palladio. So si Palladio, during the late times sa iyang career, medyo mannerism na iyang style. But actually, Palladio belongs to, for me, Palladio belongs to High Renaissance. The most famous structure designed by Palladio belongs to High Renaissance. But some of its later work, nana siya sa mannerism. Okay, so let's check kinsa ni si Palladio. So Palladio was to transform the architectural style of both palaces and churches by taking a different perspective on the notion of classicism. So when he used the triumphal arch, motif of a large arc opening with lower square top opening on either side, he invariably applied it on a small scale such as windows. So ancient Roman motif is often referred to as the Palladian arc. So nakahimo siya iyang kaugalingon nga type of arc. So gitawag siya og Palladian arc from the name itself niya nga Palladio. So ang iyang famous nga structure nga iyang design is the Villa Capra. So I think you're very familiar with this, but we'll discuss this one, no? The Villa Capra. So again, no, take note, Villa Capra doesn't belong in mannerism. Villa Capra belongs in High Renaissance. And so another example of, or another works of Andrea Palladio is San Giorgio Maguire. Okay, so let's check first this Villa Capra. So this one, I think you're very familiar with this. So Villa Capra is a famous structure during the Renaissance or during the High Renaissance architecture. It's because the way architect Palladio designed it. So it's during this time around, Villa Capra is an example of a Renaissance architecture wherein the classical style was fully implemented. Because classical style is, again, ang classical style, symmetry, proportion, and the use of this columns right here and also the pediments. So if you look at the structure itself, bisan asa ni siya tungaon, bisan asa ka mubutang og section, it's always symmetrical. So interior, my exterior, if asa ka nga facade or asa ka nga part sa building, north, south, east, west, it's the same design. So ngari ka, same ra na siya forma ngari, sa kilid same ra na forma, sa likod same ra sa forma. So if you look at the plant, which I think is quite obvious, na siya stairs right here, stairs, columns, which what we call, we have this portico right here, and then na siya dome at the center. So if you draw a section right here at the center, if mo draw kag section, mo ni siya imuhang makita right here, this one. So side and the other side are just the same gid siya. Very, very symmetrical in terms of proportion apply. So it's one of the highlight during the Renaissance architecture, during the High Renaissance architecture, and it's one of the example of a highly the way Palladio applied the classical styles is highly renowned in this structure. So the site selected was a hilltop just outside the city of Vicenza, Italy. The building was designed for a site which was suburban. So meaning layo na ni siya sa urban area. Although not that very far from the urban area, but it's not within the urban area of Italy. So the design is for completely symmetrical building having a square plan with 4 facades, each of which has a projecting portico. So again, the design of Palladio based on the pictures that we have right here and the plans, na siya'y upat ka facade or 4 facades, which is very symmetrical. Tanan nga parts bisa pa nag windows kani nga window. And mo tanaw ka sa other side ani nagya po na siya nga window. This opening right here on that other side nagya po na siya. I don't know if nabaning path, but I think within the building itself ang design lang, no. I don't know sa ilang site development if fully fully symmetrical ang ilang pagbutang. Okay, I think bago na ni nga type of path right here for their plans. Okay. So here, ang design din ni Palladio is all of these porticos right here, or kani siya nga entrance nga stairway, is actually belongs to a bigger circle. So in terms of proportion, walay usa nga nga murag ni dako or na extent. In terms of proportion, it's just all of these sides of the structure belongs to a bigger circle. So the name, manang gitawag siya og the name La Rotonda refers to the central circular hall with its dome. So here, right here. So mo ni ang kani siya. So another term di for this Villa Capra is the La Rotunda. So nganong gitawag siya La Rotunda nga di man palingin? It's because there's a circular portion of the structure wherein it's at the center, and on top of that is a dome. Each portico has steps leading up and opens via a small corridor or cabinet to the circular domed central hall. So the design reflected the humanist values of Renaissance architecture. So in order for each room to have some sun, the design was rotated 45 degrees from the cardinal point to the compass. So meaning ang north anin niya, actually medyo I don't know if this is correct one, but it says here, in order for each room to have some sun, the design was rotated 45 degrees from each cardinal point to the compass. So I'll check if this one is correct, no? But before, ang iyang north, no, sa akong na-learn is pa-diagonal. So I'll check on this one. I'll check on this example. So each of the 4 porticos, this one right here, portico 1, 2, 3, and 4, has pediments graced by statues of classical deities. So the pediments were each supported by 6 ionic columns. So let's check if 6 bagay siya, no? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so 6 gede siya. So if you notice, kabantay mo na itong window nga rin. This part right here. On that other side, nasa to siya nga window. And then, this side, nasa siya. On that other side, naagya po na siya. So if you draw a cross-sectional view of that structure, all of this, from a certain stairway to your porticos, all of that leads to the central part of the structure, which is a circle, and there's a dome on top of it. So, unsay iyang forma. Here is the interior view. So if naka sa center, mutanaw ka og one side, diretso na siya sa portico. Mulingi ka gamay, 90 degrees. It's another same view, padong gyapon sa portico. And this one right here is another view of the structure. This one is from the main entry of the property. So mo na ilang agyanan na padong. So mo na mo makitaan. And then inig muliko ka, it's just the same view, iyan nagyapong forma. So this structure has a 4 facade. And this is one of the examples of high Renaissance high Renaissance ni siya, no? Dili ni siya Mannerist. So, nganong gi-appel man nimo, sir? Yung question mo, nganong gi-appel man nimo si Palladio sa Mannerist or Mannerism? It's because on the later part, again, si Palladio, na siya yung mga gipang-create nga design, which is not that fully, di na the same, siguro gipulaan na siya design nga grabe ka symmetrical, no? So, this time around, na siya gipang design nga unsymmetrical nga mga structures. So another example of Palladio is this one, the Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza. So this is the interior view. It's a theater, and here gitawag ni siya og, actually gitawag na ni siya og Mannerist, no, or Mannerism. It's because of this part right here. Before dili ni siya daw pwede sa Renaissance architecture, but what Palladio did on this design is na siya yung mga receding portions right here, kani-kani, and the area or the interior space is full with sculptures. So again, in ang Renaissance, di ka sila ganahan og sculpture kay, again, ilang gisaway ang Gothic architecture, which is fully ornamented structures, fully ornamented buildings. So during the Renaissance architecture, they tried to create a building wherein wala kayo yung mga sculptures, but na yung mga ornaments in terms of its kanang mga cornices, in terms of its columns, but not more on the kanyang mga sculptural areas. But siguro na board si Palladio sa iyang mga super symmetry designs, yan ang gipang include nga rin sa iyang design for the Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza, Italy. Okay, so what are the characteristics and elements of Renaissance architecture? So we'll start first with characteristics. So here, in terms of plan, the plans of Renaissance buildings have a square, symmetrical appearance in which proportions are usually based on a module. So the need to integrate the design of the plan with the facade was introduced as an issue in the work of Filippo Brunelleschi, but he was never able to carry this aspect of his work into fruition. Mostly, na yung mga plano sa kang Brunelleschi na not fully symmetrical, but it is also balanced in an asymmetrical way. Though other designs like katong gihimo ni Palladio, it's fully symmetrical. So in terms of balance, it's fully balanced structure. But si Filippo Brunelleschi, although siya nag-start ani nga Renaissance architecture, siya proponent of the early Renaissance, but some of Brunelleschi's design are not that fully symmetrical. So here, the third one, the development of the plan in secular architecture, letter E, no, took place in the 16th century and culminated with the work of Palladio. So from the works of Brunelleschi until the works of Palladio. So that's the whole timeline of Renaissance architecture. It started with Brunelleschi and ends ni Palladio. So example of the plan ug unsa siya ka-symmetrical. So if you notice here, if maghimo ko nga ri og center line, so unsay naa sa other side, same side sa other side. And this one, this Blenheim Palace, dako pa kay na siya, and actually this part right here mo na siya iyang inner structure. Napa na siya other structures right here and right here. And if you notice, in this next picture right here, symmetrical gyapon. Although the spaces are not the same, but the form is actually symmetrical. So, mo na siya ang structure. Mo na ilahang main courtyard right here or atrium area. And then na siya another structure on this side and then this side. So, this is an example of a Renaissance architecture, and the building type is a palace in Oxfordshire, England. So kana no, mo na iyang aerial view. So in terms of look, in terms of ornaments ilang facade, dili kay siya well ornamented compared sa Gothic architecture, but they use those classical elements: porticos, columns, pediments, cornices, and so on and so forth. So a closer look or man's eye view of the structure, the Blenheim Palace, is like this. So nana sila yung mga windows. And then naka-arc ilang mga windows. Okay? Although, they said, based akong na-research na this time around, it started construction, the design during the Renaissance period, but actually, there's a influence of Baroque architecture during this time around, especially this one right here. Hindi na siya matawag og Renaissance architecture. This one, di na siya matawag og Renaissance architecture. Those parts of the building are actually Baroque architecture. Later on, ito sa nang i-discuss sa ng Baroque architecture. And then another examples. So in terms of plan, grabe ka symmetrical. So what type of cross is this? This is the Latin cross. Latin cross na siya. So in terms of facade, symmetrical sa ding inahang facade. So here, this is the Sant Andrea Mantua by Alberti. So if you remember si Alberti, no, it's part siya sa early Renaissance. So mo ang interior sa kanang church, the Sant or the Saint Andrea. And look at the ceiling here. Ano sa may tawag ani nga ceiling right here? This is a vaulted ceiling, pero what type of vault? Ano sa man nga types of vault? It's a barrel vault. And then this type of ceiling right here is what you call coffered ceiling. Okay, so we'll have a 5-minute break, water break, bathroom break, and then we'll continue our discussion at around 6:45. Okay, so if you have questions, if you want to clarify something, kindly type in na lang sa chat. Hello? Are you guys here? Okay na?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions so far? Lara? Hopefully nasabtan ra, no? So, to continue, aside from plan, uh, we have here facade. So, in Renaissance architecture, the facades are symmetrical around their vertical axis. So, church facades are generally surmounted by a pediment and organized by a system of pilasters, arches, and entablatures. The columns and windows show a progression towards the center. So the next one, we have domestic buildings are often surmounted by a cornice. There is a regular repetition of openings in each floor, and centrally placed door is marked by a feature such as balcony or rusticated surround. So mo ni katong rusticated nga wall na to, no, nga example. So here, Palazzo Roselai. So if you notice, no, the symmetrical way of doing this structure right here, the way they do. Actually, ang door is not that fully symmetrical, but the repetitive uh, application of their windows and then the arches, and also this pseudo na mga columns and this uh, part right here sa ilang capitals. Pseudo meaning ana kanang digid siya tinuod nga nigawas nga columns. So it's just portion of the columns, and then uh, it's not the full columns na kaya makita na to sa portico of the classical structures. So here, medyo nara siya medyo ni-emboss na part sa ilang column. But it is crowned by a Corinthian, or I think it's Corinthian or composite na capital right here. So another elements, columns and pilasters. So the Roman orders of columns are used such as Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and composite. So the orders can be either structural, supporting an arcade or architrave, or purely decorative. And then it is set against a wall in the form of pilasters. So during the Renaissance architecture, the architects aimed to use columns, pilasters, and entablatures as an integrated system. Before man gud ang ilahang columns during the Roman architecture, naa sa gawas, no? Or murag na siya isolated ang ilang mga columns. So this time around, it is integrated within the building itself. So again, a review of those capitals. We have the Tuscan, Doric, Composite, Corinthian, and we have the Ionic. So for the arches are semicircular. Arches are often used in arcades, supported on piers or columns with capitals. So kanina ni mga capitals right here, kanina mga columns. There may be a section of entablature between the capital and the springing of the arc. So this one right here, mo siya ang springing sa arc, na naiuban na naibutangan ng entablature right here. Okay, so for the vaults, this time around, the vaults do not have ribs or doesn't have ribs. Compared to Gothic architecture, the Gothic architecture uses rib vaulting, and then nasa sila yung mga groin vault, but this time around, it's completely barrel vault. They use completely barrel vault. So again, ang kanilang ceiling, they use coffered ceiling. So they are semicircular or segmental and on a square plan, unlike the Gothic vault, which is frequently rectangular. So for the dome is used frequently both as a very large structural feature that is visible from the exterior, and also as a means of roofing smaller spaces where they are only visibly internally. So domes had been used in rarely in the Middle Ages. So ang dome usually gigamit na siya during the though sa Gothic na may mga domes, Romanesque na sa mga domes ang Romanesque. And here it is highly applied sa mga churches, especially churches during the Renaissance architecture, and also during the Baroque architecture. But after the success of the dome in Filippo Brunelleschi's design for the Basilica di Santa Maria del Fiore, which is mo ni siya ang Florence Cathedral. So the complete name of the Florence Cathedral is Basilica di Santa. Kindly take note of this one. Basilica di Santa Maria del Fiore. So that's the complete name of the Florence Cathedral. And it's used in Bramante's plan for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. So the dome became an indispensable element in church architecture, later even for secular architecture such as Palladio's Villa Rotonda. So unsay another term aning Villa Rotonda ni Palladio? Another term niya is Villa Capra. So Villa Capra. Kaya ang name sa it's a Capra family actually. The term rotonda is again coined because the center of the structure is a circular area and crowned by a dome. So nahug siya rotonda, term rotonda na gamit. But actually the name of that structure is, or the building is, Villa Capra. So example of the dome of this Renaissance architecture is the Florence Cathedral. Again, kasi nag-design sa dome, si Filippo Brunelleschi. Okay, so mo ni ang gi-design ni Filippo Brunelleschi. Not the whole church. This dome ra iyang gi-design. So if you notice, dako kay siya nga dome, kay ang tao nga ri is, for example, butang kag tao nga ri is just a small dot, or dot na lang ana nga area mo na ang tao. But if you notice, the church is quite big also, and the proportion is there. So dili kay dako kayang dome niya, gamay kayang structure, or mubo sad kay in terms of height. So in terms of proportion, it is well designed. Another elements that we have, ceiling. So roofs are fitted with flat or coffered ceiling. So this is one right here. Usually makita nimo sa kanang mga interior sa mga hotels, no, right now. But nag-start ni siya nga type of design. Actually during the Roman architecture na naman siya nga design, but fully implemented, fully used during the Renaissance architecture. So they are not left open as in medieval architecture. So in medieval architecture, or like for example the Gothic architecture, makita nimo ang katong ilahang mga ribs or ilahang mga vaulting. But this time around, nasa sila separate layer, which is the ceiling, and they design it in a way na it's either flat or usually naka-covered ceiling. So nasa sila mga design yan. So they are frequently painted or decorated. Usually sa kanang mga palace, usually in England or in London, most of the palace there, kaning ilahang mga part nga di sa ilang covered ceiling, they paint it and decorated it with gold. Na gold. Like pure gold or original gold. Another elements is doors. Now, doors usually have square lintels. So mo ni ang lintels, no? Mo ni ang lintels, mo ni ang post or iyang doorway or the door jamb. They may be set within an arc or surmounted by a triangular or segmental pediment. So mo ni iyang pediment. So pwede arc, pwede triangular. So openings do not have doors, are usually arc, and frequently have a large or decorative keystone. So I don't have a picture of this one, but if walay doors, naka-arc, naka-ana ilang, or naka-ingani, like for example, no, ilang openings na if walay door, naka-arc lang, and then there's a keystone right here, decorative. So that keystone, if tangtangon na siya, actually dili maguba ang arc. Because in terms of technology during this time around in Renaissance, mas better na ilang construction methodology. Before, di ba, mahimo kag arc. The last part kapag butang nimo sa keystone, that keystone is actually the final part of the arc wherein dili mabungkag imong arc. This time around, during the Renaissance architecture, the use of keystone is just for decorative purposes. Another element is for the windows. So windows may be paired and set within a semicircular arc. So uban naka-arc, uban naka-triangular. They may have square lintels and triangular or segmental pediments, which are often used alternately. So So here, makita nimo triangle, and then we have the segmental or semicircular triangle na sad, and then repetitive na siya nga pagka-apply. Windows are used to bring light into the buildings and in domestic architecture to give views. So especially for palace, kanang mga aside from churches, nanamantay another building types during the Renaissance architecture, which are the palaces or palazzos. Sa ilang mga kwarto nga to, sa ilang mga rooms, they use windows. And then sa exterior view, they provided those windows with this type of design. Stained glass, although sometimes present, is not a feature. So, okay, again, during the Renaissance architecture, they don't really like the design of Gothic churches. That is why they opted not to use stained glass. But some of them use stained glass, but again, it's not a feature for Renaissance architecture. For the walls, so external walls are generally of highly finished ashlar masonry laid in straight courses. So the corners of the building are often emphasized by rusticated coins. So later on, makita ang tuon sa ng coins. Take note of this term. No? So basements and ground floors were often rusticated. So basement o ground floor ang naka-rusticate. And for the upper part, naka-ashlar na siya nga finish. Internal walls are smoothly plastered and surfaced with white chalk paint. So for more formal spaces, internal surfaces are decorated with frescoes. So this time around sa Renaissance architecture, ang ilang mga interior spaces, ilan ang gipaint. Compared sa before, no? Early Christian, Byzantine, Romanesque, and even Gothic architecture, all of their interior and also the same time in the exterior, walay paint. So this time around in Renaissance architecture, nigamit na silang paint for their interior walls. So again, our example for the rusticated or the rustication. So this corner right here, the way they provide or install the rusticated blocks is called coins. So nana siya mga blocks. It's a bigger rectangular blocks. Actually, makita niyo sa next slide na coins. Ano sa meaning ng coins? Coins are large rectangular blocks of masonry or brick that are built into the corners of a wall. So they can be used as a load-bearing feature to provide strength and weather protection, but also for aesthetic purposes to add detail and accentuate the outside corners of the building. So actually, kaning nasa corner nila, og sa ato pa ni nga design karon, this act as our column. Before, when they construct their palaces, their structures, they don't have that straight nga concrete column. Ba, og sa ato pa ni nga design, naka-column man ang corner. Before, what they did is, since they use bricks for their walls, the corners are made of bigger stones, bigger and heavier stones, and then medyo naka-interlocking design na siya. Medyo here, daily aligned ang pag-place sa mga big stones so that na interlocking effect or interlocking part right here for the coins. So again, coins are large rectangular blocks of masonry or brick. Another elements is for the details. So courses, moldings na siya na L. And all decorative details are carved with great precision. Studying and mastering the details of ancient Romans was one of the important aspects of Renaissance theory. The different orders each required different sets of details. Here, moldings stand out around doors and windows rather than being recessed as in Gothic architecture. So here, ilahang mga moldings is naka-recess, makita gini mo, no? Nagichay texture. So sculpted figures may be set in niche or placed in plinths. So if mo draw kag section, na siya'y murag nisulod nga space, mo siya gitawag og niche, and then nangara ilahang mga sculpted figures. Na ang sculpture. So dili siya ingon nga flat wall and then gipapilit ang sculpt. So they are not integral to the buildings, same with medieval architecture. So this time around, ang ilahang statue or sculptured figures, pwede matangtang. Pwede din na makuha and then pwede din na mabalhin. So that's during the Renaissance architecture. So this one, I think nasave pa nga page, no? It's just the same with the plan. Okay, so here are examples. Renaissance architecture in Florence, Italy. Because in Renaissance architecture, daghan na siya, no? Aside from Italy, nasa siya sa Spain, nasa siya sa Germany, and nasa siya sa Austria actually. So we'll start with Florence, Italy, and then later on we'll go through another areas such as Rome and so on and so forth. So cities of Florence or in Milan, Italy, they have this central chief powers of Italy. So if you recall, Medici family, which is founded by Giovanni de Medici, who was a commercial and political power. So moto kato si katong architect ganina nga atong na mention, actually best iyang practice is because iyang na client ni si Medici. So the vitality of a social life at every level, artists who excelled in several arts achieved high status in society. So that's during the architecture or Renaissance architecture in Florence, Italy. So one of the famous or one of the building types during this time around is the palazzi, or you can also call this palazzo. Palazzi is kanang palaces or plural sa palazzo. So with the development of gunpowder, since na naman sila pusil this time around, no need na to create those battlements, those moat and bailey, diba? So actually this time around, nanasid sila jail. Nagsugod na sad nga na jail. So again, no, with this development, kaning nanakay pusil, we have this gunpowder. Palace type building evolved, taking the place of fortified castles. So wala na tong this time around during the Renaissance architecture, wala na tong mga portcullis, wala na tong mga sa patong mga term turret, wala na tong mga battlements, the merlons and crenels. So kato siya ni na-create to during the Romanesque era. So ground floor and piano nobile. And then we have this facade of massive rugged fortress-like character due to use of rusticated masonry and wall angles called coins. So this time around, kani siya, during the Renaissance architecture, this rusticated masonry is actually a symbol of status. Meaning if imong balay naka-rusticated masonry, meaning na dato ka during this Renaissance architecture. And we have this low-pitched roof covered by balustrade, parapet, or boldly protruding roof cornice. So this time around, this is this example, the Palazzo Strozzi, gigamit siya og roof cornice. But other palaces or palazzo, gamit sila og balustrade, na yung mga balusters here on top, and others used parapet lang, naka-parapet wall. Another example, or here in Renaissance architecture in Rome, Italy. So in Rome, although older na siya sa Florence, Italy, it's just another city, another part of Italy. Lahi sa ilahang Renaissance architecture nga to, lahi ilang type. Mostly, they have this churches, which is nangad to ang St. Peter's Basilica. So here we'll start with Tempieto. So splendidly present examples of high Renaissance and proto-Baroque. Famous architect is Donato Bramante. So again, during the high Renaissance, the famous architect is Donato Bramante. And si Donato Bramante ang nag-design ani niya, which is called the Saint Tempieto of Saint Peter. So katong asa gi crucifix si Saint Peter nga pinabali, di ba, gi lansang man siya sa cross pero pinabali ang yang style. Not the same with Jesus Christ nga nakadupa nga nakaana lang, no? Si Saint Peter is actually upside down ang iyang pagka crucifix. So this site is actually diha gid namatay si Saint Peter. So gidesignan na siya ni Donato Bramante of a temple which is actually kanang tempieto, meaning ano is temple. Temple of Saint Peter in Montorio, Rome, Italy. So it resembles a small Roman circular temple with Doric columns. So these columns right here, Doric na siya and patuyok na siya. So if you noticed here, mo na siya ang iyang mga columns and then tuyok na siya. Circular in terms of plan. So sa inside, nara na siya tomb nga ni. Mura na siya og kanang tomb pero wala gid literally na nara si Saint Peter, but it's just a symbolic tomb wherein it signify that Saint Peter was martyred and crucified on that place. So again, kisay nag-design. It was designed by Donato Bramante, which is the famous architect during the High Renaissance architecture. So if you notice it, if i-cut mo section within this structure right here, kung say makikita niyo sa left side, it's just the same with the right side. And notice here the use of balustrade, one of the additional features during the Renaissance architecture, because you can see balustrades during the classical architecture. So they add on that type of design during the Renaissance architecture. Gothic architecture, di sa kita of balustrade. So this is an add-on during the Renaissance architecture. So say forma diyan sir nganong piot kani siya kaning temple asa din siya na locate. So in terms of aerial view, mo na siya aerial view. So this one, so if mosulod ka na niya to visit this one, moagi sa kaog another building. Actually, you can enter right here or you could enter right here para makasud ka ng temple for Saint Peter or Tempieto of Saint Pietro. It's actually meaning niya temple of Saint Peter. Okay. So here, as promised, the most important structure during the Renaissance architecture, especially in highly Renaissance, is the Saint Peter's Basilica in Rome. So pila ka architects nag-design sa Saint Peter's, dili lang kay isa, kundi 12. There are 12 architects that designed the Saint Peter's Basilica in Rome. So again, it is the most important Renaissance building in Italy, with cathedral, piazza, and the Vatican forms a world-famous group. So actually, Vatican is actually the smallest country, even though the Vatican is a center part of Rome, and Italy is a country, but Vatican also have that title as kanang kuan siya, independent. It's a country itself, the Vatican City, and it is the smallest country in the world. So 120 years outcome of the works of many architects under the direction of Pope. So 120 years siya nga gi-construct. So pila ka architect na nagpuli-puli ani niya construct or nagpuli-puli og design? There are 12 architects. And the first architect is Donato Bramante. So since siya ay sikat during that time, actually, ang Pope during this time around is nagpa-design competition si Pope. And ang nakadaog is si Bramante. Okay, so his design was selected from several entries in a competition. So he proposed a Greek cross plan and a dome similar to the Pantheon in Rome. So foundation stone laid in 1506. So first stone gigamit ani nga church was laid during 1506. So permiro nga stone nga ilang during the construction 1506 ang date. So what type of plan or what type of cruciform plan? Greek cross. So if you notice here, this is the Bramantes plan. Equal ang iyang sides. So meaning that type of cross is Greek cross. So since medyo tiguang na siguro si Bramante, ang iyang nipuli niya is si Giuliano di Sangalo. So, unsay nahimo ni Sangalo? Strengthened and extended the peristyle of Bramante into a series of arc and ordered openings around the base. So again, no, strengthened and extended the peristyle of Bramante into a series of arced and ordered openings around the base. So actually, unsay plano ni Bramante, continue lang ni Sangalo, ni Giuliano di Sangalo. And number 3, si Fra Giocondo, works included strengthening the foundation. So actually, after namatay si Bramante, or medyo ill na, kanang padung na sa iyang later life or later years of his life, this three is a team. Usa ni siya ka-team. Si Disangalo, Giocondo, and Rafael. These two, Giuliano Disangalo and Fra Giocondo, these are the architects that are tasked to oversee the construction. So in terms of strengthening, in terms of the pag-construct na sa building, these two architects are working hand on hand during the construction. And this one, kani si Rafael, na siya'y laing gusto, which is, iyang ganahan is a Latin cross plan. So from this plan of Bramante, what Rafael did is, he extended this portion. And it shows in this plan right here, a new plan, the floor plan made by Rafael, and it's a Latin cross plan. So again, anong Latin cross? Mas extended or mas longer ang iyang one side. Okay, so the main change in Rafael's plan is the nave of 5 bays with a row of complex apsidal chapels of the aisles on the either side. So here, mo no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lima ka base. So number 5, we have Peruzzi. Di ko sila friend ni Rafael, but Peruzzi right here, iyang gibalik pagka Greek cross ang plano ni Rafael. And more sad na I don't know if napa siya laing na nabuhat, but gibalik niya pagka Greek cross. So iyang gibalik based sa design ni Bramante. Actually, winning design ni siya. So I think Peruzzi right here was influenced by the Pope. Siguro the Pope doesn't like the plan of Raphael. Nag-change niya into a Latin cross. Another architect, number 6, is si Antonio de Sangalo. Actually, anak ni siya ni Giuliano de Sangalo. Anak ni siya, the younger. So, yang gi-alter ang plan, slightly alter the plan, na siya gi-extend. So, yung gi-extend, the vestibule, right here, kanang before ka mo entry, and campanile and elaborated the central dome. So, actually, the whole plan of the St. Peter's Basilica was completo na siya during the design of Bramante. But extensions made by these architects, siguro based on their own designs, in ang own views, na sila yung mga gipangdungag. And right here, si number 7, undertook the project at 72 years old. So imagine unsa nakagulang si Michelangelo, 72 years old, and then sakit na yung likod o painting atong Sistine Chapel, di ba? And iyang gibalik pagka Greek cross plan. So again, no, si Michelangelo, iyang undertook ang project and iyang gibalik based on the original plan of Donato Bramante. So Greek cross plan strengthened the dome, redesigned also the surrounding chapels. So the dome is actually designed initially by Bramante, but during the construction of the dome, during the implementation of the dome, ngadto gyud si Michelangelo, siya mo nag-oversee. And iyang gi-redesign ang dome, not the form, but how to strengthen the dome. So di man siya idea how to strengthen the dome. Actually, nigamit siya sa idea ni Filippo Brunelleschi on how Filippo Brunelleschi created the largest dome in Italy, which is the Florence Cathedral. Number 8, si Giacomo della Porta. So from 1573, he was in charge of the ongoing construction of St. Peter's Basilica. So in collaboration with Fontana, ilang na-complete ang dome ni Michelangelo. So actually si Michelangelo wala niya na finish or nahuman ang iyahang design sa dome because medyo I think tiguwang na, and na-complete ni De La Porta and Fontana. And number 10, we have Vignola. Actually, ang whole name niya is Jacopo Barozzi di Vignola. So, added side cupolas. Actually, ano siya, watchdog na siya. Siguro naglagot ang Pope ng kapuya ng mga arkitekto. From kapila naman gibalik ang Greek Latin, yung Greek na sad, yung gibalik na sad. So, to make sure that Michelangelo's plans were carried out exactly after his death. So actually, namatay gid siya, no? During the kanang pagtukod sa St. Peter's Basilica. And number 11 is actually siya na yung naghuman, si Carlo Maderno. Carlo Maderno. So lengthen nave to form Latin cross. So this time around, gibalik na sa nila og Latin cross. And actually, this is the final form, ang Latin cross. And built the gigantic facade. So the facade of the building is based on Maderno's design. So made the most significant contribution since Michelangelo. So actually, ang contribution, di ba 12 man sila, no? But actually, the contribution can be narrowed down to Bramante, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Maderno. So upat na sila ang dako kay contribution. We have Bramante, the main architect. We have Raphael, which is changes some of the plans. And then we have Michelangelo, implemented the dome and redesigned the dome. And Maderno, which is redesign again the plan, siguro yung i-follow ang plan ni Raphael, and completed the whole structure, including the facade. And this one right here, si Bernini, which is si Gian Lorenzo Bernini, siya nag-design sa piazza. So later on, ato ipakita unsay pormahan niya. So here, this is the Maderno's plan. Okay. So this facade right here of the St. Peter's Basilica, the whole thing is designed by Carlo Maderno. The piazza right here is designed by Bernini. So kanina the whole piazza, no? And then ang columns is Tuscan yung gamit. Tuscan. So zoom view, Tuscan yung gamit. You notice right here. So since around 7:20, we'll just run through some of these examples. So here in France, if you notice here, most of the examples are chateau. So again, it's another building type, but actually chateau is just a palace. And it's just a term in France nga gitawag nila chateau. So in Italy, naka-palazzo. Here in France is naka-chateau. But the design is completely different. It's not the same design as palazzo in Italy. So in France, they made this gigantic designs and then well-landscaped ng mga palaces, which is they call chateau. And then this time around na design nila ang or nigamit sila og mansard roof. So I think you're very familiar, no? Types of roof. We have the gable, the common, the gable, and the hip roof. And then we have this mansard roof right here. So gigamit siya sa Chateau de Maisons. And another examples, we have the churches. So these are the Renaissance churches in Paris. So we have the Church of the Val de Grace. And we have here the Saint Gervais in Paris. And in England, they have this period. So we have this Elizabethan, Jacobean, Stuart, Georgian, Elizabethan mansions. Actually, this terms right here, it will differ based on the kinsay ilahang king and queen. So Elizabethan during the reign of Elizabeth. Jacobean, it's actually during the I forgot the king, but it's not from the term Jacob, no, but there's another king na ni rule sa England. So gitawag siya Jacobean, and then gitawag na sa another Stewart, and then and so on and so forth. So these are examples during the Renaissance architecture in England. And we have here Stuart buildings. Actually, this one is the banqueting house. This one is the Queen's house. So influenced by Palladian architecture. And another example right here, we have the Georgian houses. So kindly run through na lang, no? And one of the best, for me, one of the best church during the Renaissance, aside from the St. Peter's Basilica, is this church right here, the St. Paul's Cathedral in London. So St. Paul's Cathedral, designed by Christopher Wren. I will share a video about the St. Paul's Cathedral. It's a good reference for you guys to watch. So in aerial view, mo na siya ang St. Paul's Cathedral. Okay, so we'll stop right here. Napayuban nga mga slides, but we'll just run through about it siguro mga first few minutes in our next meeting. Okay, so I think the quiz is already available now. So kindly start on answering the quiz, and then kindly submit within 7:30. Although it will close around 8, but kindly submit within the time allotted. Okay, so if you have questions, guys, kindly chat here sa ato meeting chat. And for your quiz, see multiple choice, sayon ra kaayo. So be honest with your answers. Answer only using your sa inyong mga nasabtan.